Ever wonder why some arguments explode in public like emotional fireworks? There's a deeper story behind those borderline outbursts, and it's not what most people think. What looks like yelling on the outside is often freaking out on the inside. So, I want to talk about the real psychological engine behind BPD outbursts because behind every public meltdown is a heart fighting a battle no one else can see. So, let's talk about what really drives borderline outbursts. Have you ever seen a juicy fight between a couple? It could be exciting and exhilarating, and it could also be terrifying. I have to admit, I've seen some real life juicy couple fights in my life. Not very many, though, mostly on TV. But I definitely remember one time when I was a kid, we were at a park and a man drove by and pushed his wife out of the moving car onto the ground. And everybody tried to help her, and she really wouldn't accept much help. And then the next thing you know, he's driving back and comes and gets her, and she goes back in the car with him and they drive off. And I often wondered what happened to that lady. I remember also a man and a woman arguing, and the man was dragging the lady by her jean pants, like the back pocket, like just dragging her, pulling her, and she was yelling at him and telling him to stop. I can remember another fight where there was a couple just walking together and the guy just started fighting her, like knocked her down to the ground. I mean, she rolled into the street. And then a few seconds later, she got up and they started walking together like nothing had ever happened. So I'm sure you've also seen couples having heated arguments. And that doesn't mean that one of the people is a borderline. However, there is always the possibility, and you can especially see the possibility when not only is it a couples, but somebody's just yelling at somebody, and then you hear them yelling and it doesn't make any sense, or it's over something extremely minute, like the color of the wall should be painted this color beige instead of this color beige. And it turns into a huge fight and a huge outburst and argument over something that's easily correctable because you haven't even bought the paint yet. You're just looking at samples. I've seen people have huge fights in places where no one should be fighting publicly because they're places of respect. And they're fighting over things that are very small. I've seen people fight over things that make absolutely no sense, like you brought cupcakes. You brought extra cupcakes so people can enjoy them. Why didn't you tell me you were bringing more cupcakes? So what, who cares? I mean, it's not your money, so who cares? I mean, just big, huge fights over super tiny misunderstandings that if you just stop and have a conversation and say, what did you mean by that? Or can you clarify? You could get quick clarification, but instead they won't listen and they just are determined that they're going to fight you and argue with you about something that is nothing and I've seen people turn some really wonderful, pleasant events into huge screaming matches, and it doesn't make any sense. So I believe some of these people have been borderlines who take events that are supposed to be fun, and by the end, they've started fights with everybody there. Makes no sense to the logical mind because it feels like, okay, this is so easily solvable, or I'm trying to understand the outrage. It doesn't fit the crime, like what you're angry about and how you're treating someone doesn't fit what they're actually doing. I don't want to say, what are you screaming about? And then a lot of times they can't tell you completely why they're screaming or what they did wrong. It's the other person that did something to them. And sometimes if you really press them to explain it, they can't really do it. So why would someone with BPD yell or have a public meltdown? People with BPD often experience emotions with extreme intensity, and their reactions can feel sudden or disproportionate from the outside. But inside, there's usually a very understandable psychological chain reaction happening. So let's have a little bit of a deeper breakdown. Of course, at the top of the list is fear of abandonment gets triggered. Even tiny cues, tone of voice, a delayed text, a facial expression can feel like rejection. When that fear spikes, the nervous system goes into fight or flight, and yelling becomes a way to fight for connection or prevent perceived loss. And how about emotions hit like a tidal wave? People with BPD often feel emotions more intensely and for longer. A small conflict can feel like a catastrophe. Public settings add pressure, making the emotional surge even harder to regulate. And when they get in that mode, they don't care who's listening. Difficulty regulating impulses. During emotional overload, the brain's impulse control systems struggle. Yelling can happen before the person even fully processes what they're feeling. Feeling misunderstood or invalidated. If a borderline feels dismissed, ignored, or criticized, even unintentionally, it can trigger a defensive reaction. Yelling becomes a way to demand to be heard or taken seriously. Then there's shame and vulnerability underneath it. Ironically, many people with BPD feel deep shame after an outburst. And I know that might be hard for you to believe, but it's true. They feel a lot of shame. The public nature of it often wasn't intentional. It's a sign of how overwhelmed they were. Trauma history. Many people with BPD have past experiences where yelling was the only way to be noticed or protected. Their nervous system learned that intense reactions equal survival. So the real deal in one sentence is a public outburst from someone with BPD is usually not about control or manipulation, but about overwhelming fear, emotional pain, and a nervous system in crisis. So I want you to start thinking about how you can respond in the moment if a BPD is having an outburst with you, how to protect your own boundaries, how to understand the emotional logic behind BPD reactions, or what these outbursts might mean in a relationship dynamic. Even sometimes when you're having a regular conversation with somebody with BPD, they may raise their voice or have very strong intonation sometimes, and it doesn't make sense because you feel like they're yelling at me, but they're not yelling at you, not in their minds. And I know that that's hard to understand, but they don't recognize that they're doing that. So you have to practice overlooking that. And not all BPDs do that, but some of them do. They will be yelling things or getting really excitable and upset though. And sometimes it is about something that they're frustrated at, but they kind of go over the top with telling you about it. Or they might get irritated really quickly, especially if you are a family member when they're trying to make a point, or if you ask questions, you're making their brain have to work harder than what they want to work because they're already working really hard. And so you have to kind of learn to excuse the loud intonations and the sounding like they're upset and look past that and think about, okay, what is it that they're really saying? Can I figure some of this out on my own so that I don't irritate or frustrate them? You might ask them for points of a story or a gathering that they went to that you don't know the details, and they start getting irritated and frustrated when you ask more questions about it. So you might want to step back and just let them talk, let it flow, and get as much information from them as they're willing to give. So, yeah, they definitely have difficulty regulating their emotions, which is part of the disorder. But if you don't know that somebody has BPD, you can feel upset or like you did something wrong or like they're mad at you when they actually may not be. So in the end, those public explosions aren't really about you and they aren't about chaos. They're about a nervous system begging to be understood. And once you see the storm for what it really is, you'll never look at an outburst the same way again. Behind every raised voice is a story, a wound, a fear that's louder than the moment itself. The real question isn't why they yelled, it's what pain they were trying so desperately to outrun. So, what looks like volatility is often a survival strategy written years before the moment unfolds. Understanding that truth doesn't excuse the behavior, but it does reveal the humanity inside it. Maybe the outburst is just the surface. Maybe the real story is everything we don't see. And if you're willing to take a deeper look, the next chapter might surprise you. So, hey, beautiful people. Thanks for watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments and what topics you want me to explore next. Your feedback means so much to me. Let's keep this adventure going. Don't break up with me. Be sure to subscribe and like the video. Check out my books on Amazon for insights on enhancing your love life, navigating narcissistic personalities, and exploring the 16 Myers-Briggs personality types. Links are in the description. You're amazing, and I can't wait to see you on the next video.